So the T-Wolves are kind of a weird team to talk about for the 2018 or 2019, whatever the hell season's coming up here, because the roster's really not that much different from what it was last year. I mean, starting five's all the same. There's some new draft picks coming in. Derrick Rose, I guess, is the full-time Jamal Crawford now. And then you've got Anthony Tolliver replacing Bjelica. However, when you look at the totality of their situation in terms of like the personalities involved, Jimmy Butler's contract, Thibodeau and his tendency to play starters, on top of like the Western Conference always being just a murderer's row, I do think that makes the T-Wolves a little more interesting. I guess if we can start with just them, though, it's kind of weird. I feel like I could picture this team doing better than maybe most would expect, but I could also picture this season being a complete disaster. The disaster being Jimmy Butler misses like 15 to 20 games, which is, you know, kind of an expectation at this point. Towns and Wiggins not improving at all defensively. Wiggins still just being this kind of blah offensive player where, like, yeah, he'll put up 20 points, but it's like the most boring 20 points ever, full of mid-range jumpers and ISOs and all that, and like he doesn't improve as a playmaker. And the personalities are all clashing together. Wiggins wants more shots, Towns doesn't like Thibodeau, Jimmy Butler hates everyone. And then this team wins like 30-something games. They're forced to trade Jimmy Butler mid-season, or maybe they wouldn't even find a move and he would just flat out leave. And then, you know, from there, what happens with Thibodeau or whatever. But then I could also picture it going really well, where maybe Towns comes into next season and he's actually not maybe the worst big man in the NBA defensively. And Wiggins, to be fair, got a little better this previous season on defense, and maybe he can continue that where he can at least just be like Wilson Chandler at his peak defensively, which is like okay at least, you know. And then this team can still be what they were last season offensively, and before you know it, they're like, I don't know, 6th in offense, and then they're like 13th in defense, and then before you know it, they win like 50-something games, and they're like 3rd seed in the West, and it's like, wait a minute, what just happened? Now, in reality, it's probably somewhere in the middle, where Towns maybe takes a marginal improvement defensively, Wiggins gets a little better, and everything else pretty much stays the same. However, if we do look at potential changes, I'm actually going to start with Wiggins' offense. Would it really be that big of a deal if he was given a little bit more of the offense? Like, you could argue, well, it's not an argument, it's a fact that him wanting to be like the second or first option on this team is ridiculous. But could he still have a larger role than, let's say, Jeff Teague, right? Or maybe larger than what he had before, because his usage rate was still higher than Jeff Teague a year ago. I mean, I'm not going to leave it outside of the realm of possibility that Wiggins makes a jump. Like, I feel like it's very easy to look at him and just be super disappointed, I get it. But the dude was still praised coming into the NBA, and it's his 5th season now, and we've seen dudes make jumps. And you figure it's got to happen at some point with this guy, right? Whether it's simply improving on his three-pointer, improving on his playmaking, improving on his rebounding, like, it's got to be something. I refuse to believe that Andrew Wiggins, who was viewed at one time as being like one of the best first-round picks in a while, is just going to be this high teens, low 20s dude who doesn't do anything else. So I'm going to expect that something improves this upcoming season. As far as what it is, I don't really know. But it's got to be something with him. As far as Towns, I mean, it's really just defense at this point, so I'm not even going to dive into that one. If you can get a little better, awesome. Where I actually want to go from here, because I think the rest of the team is pretty much, it is what it is, I want to go to Anthony Tolliver, because I think this could end up being one of those small moves this offseason that ends up being kind of a big deal. He's going to play mainly Bjelica's role last season, right? The difference is Bjelica was sometimes a little hesitant shooting from outside, whereas Tolliver is like kind of a gunner at this point. He shoots like 4 threes a game at pretty damn good percentages. So you could see a little bit more spacing. I think him and Towns together could be pretty effective, and I wouldn't even be shocked if Tolliver ends up being like just as valuable as Taj Gibson is for them, because of course Gibson remains like one of the best around the basket defenders in the NBA. But I don't think he has Tolliver's perimeter defensive capabilities. Not to act like Tolliver's some Paul Millsap level defender, because he isn't, but he's not bad either. So I think against certain teams, you could see that if a team goes to a smaller lineup, Tolliver may end up being more valuable than Taj Gibson is against, whoever that team may be. So I do like the Tolliver signing. Now, does it mean a huge win difference? I mean, probably not, but he's still a pretty decent player. I think the transition to that would be, what do we get from Derrick Rose, if we're going to be looking at the second unit, right? To be fair, D. Rose, towards the end of this last season, not bad. And if we're looking at that round 1 series against the Rockets, where Rose was just attacking the basket so much, I mean, if you want to look at the on-off numbers, Derrick Rose was technically their best player in that series, because he played 120 minutes total, and while his on-court net rating was still about -1, it was way better than basically everybody else besides Jimmy Butler. Now, does that mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things? Probably not, but it's a good sign nonetheless. I mean, if Derrick Rose is just going to barrel his way to the rim and you put some okay shooting around him, then I think you can make something work with that, And I think Tyus Jones was one of the better backup point guards in the NBA last season. Could that be a quality backup backcourt? Maybe. I mean, Derrick Rose playing more of an off-ball role could be a thing. I mean, it could result in some rough spacing sometimes, but I think there's some room for that to maybe work with him as a cutter and that sort of thing. But I also believe Derrick with the ball in his hands and then Tyus Jones playing off the ball, that could be successful because Tyus can shoot. Or at least kind of shoot. He's not some knockdown dude, but, he'll take it if he's open. So, you look at the T-Wolves bench, right? Maybe Derrick Rose will be good. Tyus Jones has been good. Tolliver I like a lot. Gorgie Dang is still an NBA player. And then you also look at this other dude that they drafted. I think his name is James Nunnally, if I'm pronouncing the last name right. He's a pretty good shooter. His percentages are very good from the EuroLeague. He didn't take too many a game, took 2 or 3 a game, but one year he also took 6 a game and he shot about 40%, and he's also 6'8", and apparently he cares about defense, so could be a two-way wing for you. You've also got Bates Diop, who also seems like a wing player who can maybe be a defender and a shooter, who fell quite a lot in the draft. I might make a video on him because he is a pretty interesting dude. He's 6'9", he's like a Robert Covington kind of guy, but he fell all the way to 48. So if one of these two could be day one impact kind of guys, then suddenly a big weakness for the T-Wolves last season could end up being, if not a strength, at least a neutral thing, their second unit, and maybe that could allow the starters' minutes to go down just a little bit. I mean, I never expect Thibodeau to play his starters 30 minutes a game, but maybe they could creep down to 33, which then, if anything, it just gives you a better chance of Jimmy Butler not getting hurt, which, I mean, if he's out, then this team doesn't make the postseason. So, yeah, I think that's about all I got on the T-Wolves. If I can make a prediction, I think this team will be about as good as they were last season. I think Jimmy Butler will miss some time because he pretty much always does. I think Towns and Wiggins will make some improvements, but it's not going to be enough to see a huge difference with this team. And while I like the potential of the second unit, it's still a stars league at the end of the day. So, yeah, and then you combine that with the Lakers now are going to be in the mix in the West and all that. So I think Minnesota is definitely going to be right in the thick of it in the playoffs, but I would not be surprised if they missed it by a couple games. I wouldn't be surprised if they got in there by 2 to 4 games, but somewhere between number 6 and number 9 or something like that is probably where Minnesota will end up.